Okay, so in this section, we're going to be talking about the specs of the new iPhone. So I'm going to look at Apple's website to see all the different specs that come with the iPhone XS Max, the iPhone XS, and the iPhone XR. We're also going to compare those to some of the older models like the iPhone 8, the iPhone 7, whatever information we can get from the Apple website. And I'm going to break down what those specs mean and use all the tools that you can find yourself on the Apple website. This is very important because you might want to look at the specs that come with your camera, and then later on we're going to break down each one individually a little bit more. So when we look over here to the iPhone website, you go to iPhone and then you go to compare iPhone models, and then you can see here the different models. Now I'm going to make this one the XS Max, this one the XS, and this one the XR. If you're not already familiar with the latest iPhone models, the XS Max is a new bigger iPhone. The XS is the next version from the iPhone 10. And the XR is the cheaper version of these two that is a little bit bigger than the X and the XS and smaller than the XS Max, but it has a camera that's not as good as the XS and the XS Max. And you're going to see that these two over here have a similar camera. Just about everything's about the same. So we're going to go over everything. So as we scroll down, you see here, they both have a dual 12 megapixel front facing camera. So this is the camera over here, and they both have wide angle and telephoto cameras. This is for the XS Max and the XS, but the XR does not have two cameras. So the reason that these iPhones have two cameras is because one of the cameras is a telephoto lens and one of them's a wide angle lens. So what that means is that one of them, the cameras, helps the phone zoom in and shoot nice telephoto pictures, meaning that from far you can zoom in and it looks really nice and crisp, while the other one, if you zoom in, is a digital zoom, which means you're losing quality as you're zooming in. It's the same as zooming in on a picture, but with a telephoto lens, you're zooming in and you're not losing detail. The quality is still 12 megapixels. So it's the same as with a professional camera having the long lens. So it's better when you have a telephoto lens on the camera, so that you can zoom in and not lose detail. And we'll talk more about that later on. The other thing is that it has a wide angle one too. So at the same time, it shoots wide and you can zoom in. And that's why it needs two cameras, one to do one feature and one to do the other one. And they're working together all the time. So that's kind of how these work. The XR does not have that feature. So it just has one regular lens, similar to what you might find in like the older iPhones, like the iPhone 6 and stuff like that, before the camera started releasing these dual cameras. So the front-facing camera is a 7 megapixel true depth camera, which is basically distinguishing depth in the image, which is good for face detection and stuff like that, so that it can unlock the screen with face detection. It doesn't make much of a difference when taking pictures, but it does for face detection. So 7 megapixels, which is still pretty good. 7 to 12 is good. You might think a DSLR camera can shoot like 20 megapixels, 18 megapixels. All that these megapixels mean is the size of the image when printed, okay? Which means you can zoom in more and it'll still be sharp on a bigger megapixel camera. But when it comes to like just looking at the picture in full, like you post it on Facebook or you just print a regular size picture, it's gonna look sharp and beautiful all throughout. But the 20 megapixels and the bigger megapixel cameras can print really large and then from edge to edge it looks sharp, or you can zoom into the image and it looks the same as like a 12 megapixel when you crop it. So you can crop more when you have more megapixels, but chances are you're not really cropping. You're compositing your images so that you have everything you want in frame. So 12 megapixels is enough, 7 megapixels is enough. You don't have to worry about having more megapixels. So now we go down to here, all the way down to camera. So you see here that is 12 megapixel, 12 megapixel wide angle and telephoto. The next spec that you're going to see here is that it has an f1.8 aperture on the wide angle lens, which is just the normal one. When you open up your camera, it's automatically on the wide angle. When you zoom in, that's when you get the telephoto. So at wide angle you get 1.8 aperture, at telephoto you get 2.4 aperture. So let's talk about what that means real quick. So when it comes to aperture, the lower the number, the better it is in low light. Okay, so the 1.8 is better with low light than the 2.4. So you're going to see that when you zoom into the telephoto lens, if it's kind of dark, you're going to lose some of the detail. Like it's going to, the grain is going to show up because it's boosting the ISO because it's not at 1.8 aperture. So you don't need to really understand this in depth. Just know that when you're not zoomed in, it's going to look better quality when it comes to low light. When it comes to full light, like you're shooting outside and everything, they're both going to look exactly the same. Okay? You're not going to see like the quality loss in the telephoto over the wide angle. Now, the next thing that comes with aperture is the out of focus that you can get in your pictures. So when you have a lower number, 1.8, what ends up happening is that things behind it look blurry than whatever's in focus. So you focus on something and then the background goes blurry. The lower that number can get, the more blurry the background gets. Now, what's really interesting is that you can get a 1.8 aperture on a phone, which is amazing because when you go to a professional camera, in order to get a 1.8 aperture, you need a prime lens, which means a whole nother lens than the lens that comes with your camera to get the 1.8, which is good for low light, which is good for blurry backgrounds. But you already have that on your iPhone, which is amazing because you don't have to pay extra for another lens or anything. It already comes standard built in. So like the lens that comes with my professional camera, I need to get a prime lens, and then I can zoom in or out with a prime lens. It's just good for that purpose. An aperture opening that makes it good for low light, good for blurry backgrounds, but I can't zoom in or out. The iPhone, you can zoom in with the telephoto lens. So the telephoto lens is basically my zoom lens that comes with my professional camera, and my wide angle lens is my prime lens that comes with my professional camera. Two professional lenses in one. And 2.4 is still pretty wide because the standard lens that comes with a professional camera shoots between 3.5 to 5.6, which is a higher number than 2.4. In order to get a 2.4 aperture, I need a close to $1,000 zoom lens. My 24 to 70 is only 2.8. This is 2.4. It's just amazing aperture, good for low light, good for blurry backgrounds, which is what we're going to see later when we make the backgrounds really blurry, shallow depth of field and stuff. So I just wanted you to know that it can do that. The iPhone XR can do 1.8 aperture, but it cannot do the telephoto. It doesn't have that telephoto lens, but it still has a 1.8, which is pretty good, right? So we're fine with just that. Now, optical image stabilization, dual optical image stabilization means, now some of my lenses have image stabilization too. Wow, my pronunciation is terrible. I'm sorry, you guys. It basically makes it so that the shakiness from your hand motion doesn't cause the image to go blurry. Now, when you're going handheld, chances are you're moving, right? And that movement usually causes an image to go blurry. Thanks to this feature, now it won't go blurry. Now, it still could go blurry if you're moving a lot, but not as blurry as if it didn't have stabilization. So you don't have to worry that much about just being completely still, not moving an inch when you're taking a picture, because it's built in so that it can do that. And this dual optical means that it is built for both the wide angle and the telephoto. Okay, so now so wide color capture for photos and live photos just means that the colors look really good. Okay, the quad LED true tone flash with slow sync basically means that the flash system is advanced. You're going to see all these cool features when we get to the flash section of the camera, so you can see what it can do. But for now, just know that it is state of the art, really good at shooting with flash. You're going to see all these cool features that it can do. So quad LED basically just means that there's like 4 little LED lights in this little flash here in the back. Okay. Portrait mode with advanced bokeh and depth control. They all have that. The older iPhones did not have that. Okay. So with portrait mode, you're going to see later when we get to the portrait mode section of the camera, it's set up to be able to get really cool shallow depth of field, which means the background goes blurry and the thing in focus stands out more. Now, advanced bokeh and depth control means that with advanced bokeh, the lights in the background that are out of focus are going to create this nice bokeh that's going to like look really nice. Like, have you ever seen like when something's out of focus, a little light? Let me just show you guys bokeh really quick. So bokeh, this is bokeh right here. So as you see here, the bokeh is when the lights are out of focus, they turn into like this little circle. Now with advanced bokeh, they're gonna stand out even more, which is what people want in professional photography. They want bokeh if they're shooting in low light and they have these lights in the background. So the iPhone now has advanced bokeh. So now the bokeh is gonna look even nicer. And then depth control means that now after you take the picture, you can change your aperture setting to change how blurry the background is. No camera in the history of time has ever been able to do that after you take the picture. Now, yes, you can go into Photoshop, highlight the background and add a blur to it, but it's not like what's built in from the camera. It's something you do in editing afterwards. This is something I've never seen before. I really can't explain how it does that. But it basically found a way to give you all the different apertures. So the wide opening aperture that makes the background very blurry, and the closed aperture, which makes it so that the background's in focus, all in the same image. So you take a picture and then you can change it and make the background very blurry or very in focus, which is amazing. We're going to see that more in a little bit. And then, so they all can do that, which is pretty cool. So all the latest iPhones that came out in 2018 can do that. And then the lighting effects. So you have portrait lighting with 5 different effects. So you have natural, studio, contour, stage, and stage mono. But the XR only has natural, studio, contour. Chances are you're not going to use any of these portrait lighting effects. So don't worry if you have a phone that doesn't have these lighting effects. You don't really want to use this. They're kind of lame in my opinion. We'll play with them and you can see what they do, but chances are you're not really going to use those. And then they all have smart HDR photo, which means that it's always looking at the scene and mixing highlights and shadows and neutral tones together so you have high dynamic range. I know I just threw a bunch of limbo at you that you might not understand, but when we get to the HDR section of this course, you're really going to understand that. But the fact that it's smart means that it's always working together to get a really nice exposed image in the highlights and in the shadows. So the shadows have detail, the highlights aren't blown out. So it's always working smart to do it. Now let's look at really quickly what some of these things are, and then we're going to compare them to some of the older phones. So what you do here is you click where it says learn more, and it takes you here to just the camera specs. You could also go to iPhone and cameras and you can see what it does. So nice image here. What I'm going to do here is make the screen a little bit smaller so you can see everything. Okay, so here we go. Sensor, processors, algorithms, and whatever. Now, one thing you want to note is that sensors. So when it comes to sensors and cameras, the later the camera is, the later the sensor is. And when the sensor is newer, it's better at detail and it's better at low light. Now, when it's better at detail and low light, you're going to get a nicer looking image and a better exposed image without grain and low light versus older cameras. So the newer your iPhone is, the better the sensor is going to be when taking these pictures. The quality is going to be better and it's going to shoot better in low light. Same with professional cameras. The later the model year of that camera is, chances are the later the sensor is, the newer the sensor is, and that's going to shoot better in low light. So I can't rely completely on just the price of the camera. Sometimes a $600 professional camera that's the latest model versus a 3-year-old $2,000 camera. This a $600 camera has a better sensor than the $2,000 camera that's older, just because it's using the latest sensors. So that's something a little bit about sensors if you want to know. Okay, so now we're looking here. Smart HDR. Okay, so when it comes to smart HDR, it's basically enhances ISP, advanced algorithms. Smart HDR brings more highlights and shadow details to your photo. So basically the way that that works is that if you click here, okay, so you get more information in the shadows and in the highlights. So let's look at this image real quick. Normally without smart HDR, the floor in this garage door would be all black. You can't see it. And then this would be a little bit brighter, and then he might be normal. So this would be very bright and this will go all black. With smart HDR, you can still tell the sidewalk, you can still see the fire hydrant, you can still see the garage, and you can see the detail in the wall here. In this image, this is showing that without smart HDR, this would be very bright and this will go all black. But with smart HDR, you can still see this and you can still see this. You can see all the detail. Here, he would go all black and the sky will go all bright. And this would be all white and this would be all black. But now the sky looks normal and you can still see detail in him. So that's what smart HDR does. It shows information in the dark parts and in the bright parts and mix it all together so you have nice dynamic range. You really need some comparisons of without HDR and smart HDR to really tell, but just trust me that it's there and it looks really good. Okay, so now the next thing is the advanced depth of field. So as you see here in this like GIF here, this little video playing, the background goes completely blurry, right? When it changes to f1.4. Now, we saw earlier that the camera has f1.8, but it supposedly has f1.4 built in. I'm not going to question it really. All that matters is that when you're at f1.4, the background's very blurry. I guess if I go like this, Okay, so I had to press play. So when you go to f16, everything in the background is in focus, and when you go to f1.4, it's blurry, and it doesn't change the exposure on her. So she looks perfectly lit. It doesn't change anything. Aperture is supposed to change things. When you go to f1.4 is the brightest. When you go to f16 is the darkest. As you're changing that bar in any camera, the picture gets brighter or darker, except in the iPhone. In the iPhone is the only camera that you can mess with the setting, and everything else is set to auto, and it's gonna make sure that the exposure on her does not change while you're changing this. Now what you're doing is only changing how blurry the background is, which no camera can really do, and this can do it after the picture is taken, which is even more amazing. With the professional cameras, you can do this before you take the picture, but with iPhone, you can do this after you take the picture, which is amazing. Okay, enhanced bokeh, so the lights here look a little nicer. Okay, let's look at more bokeh pictures. Okay, the light here looks cool. Okay, background looks nicer. They should have really shown like some lights and stuff that like look like circles and whatever. Okay. Anyway, okay, so enhanced portrait mode selfie. The True Depth camera generates a precise depth map to keep you in focus against a blurry background. Depth control lets you adjust the depth of field after you shoot. So that's what we talked about. And it's cool that you can do this in selfie mode too. I would guess that you can only do this with this camera, because usually all the cool stuff you can do with this camera, and you can't do anything cool with this camera. But it's cool that you can do this with both cameras. More light detail. So we were talking about the sensor earlier. Larger pixels. Deeper to improve image fidelity, and larger to allow more light to hit the sensor. The results even better low light photos. So iPhones, phone cameras have been known to shoot really bad low light pictures. But with the latest technology, they shoot almost as good or sometimes even better than professional cameras. I was shooting at an event the other day, and when I was shooting with my professional camera, and with just a room light, it was struggling. I felt like I needed to use a prime lens. My standard kit lens wasn't good enough. When I shot it with my iPhone, it looked better. It's crazy because I was just telling my girlfriend, let's just shoot all the pictures with my phone, because I know I have my professional camera, but my phone shoots really good at low light. It's just crazy. Okay, so sharper action, zero shutter lag, freeze a moment in time with highlights and shadow. So looks like Smart HDR can so HDR normally takes 3 pictures. Okay, so it takes one with the highlights, one with the midtones, and one with the shadows, right? Now, and then puts them all together. But how do you take 3 images while somebody's jumping or action shots? Well, Smart HDR does this so quick that it really does freeze the action and does the HDR process all together, which is amazing. And then 4K video, but this is not about video. And then this is talking about, okay, so the depth control, this is what it looks like. And the phone, this is what portrait lighting looks like. Okay. 2.2 aperture when shooting with the front-facing camera, which is pretty good too. Look at this bokeh here. Okay. So that's it. Okay. Okay, so we looked at all the specs for the latest cameras, the latest iPhones that came out. In the next lecture, I'm going to be talking about the comparison within that and the older iPhones, in case you have an iPhone 8, 7, and so on. If you only have the latest iPhones, you can skip the next lecture that might not relate to you. But now we're going to compare it to some of the older iPhones.